So obviously last week, we saw all those reform councils and all the stuff start to move, and they've now formed their councils and have absolutely no idea at all what they are doing. One of the other things that has happened, and you have seen this, media silence. Media silence from these guys. They have been told uniformly by, of course, probably their control unit down in London. Just remember, guys, you haven't elected a local councillor. You've elected a puppet that Nigel Farage gets to control from his office down in London. So they've all been told you are not allowed to do interviews, media appearances. There has been blackout on this, right? Not a single one has come forward and said something, right? Right. But what about, dare we say, people who do report, maybe on local news and local issues, or maybe, smaller local independent news outlets that maybe have done this. Maybe, for example, one of these reform councillors maybe sort of did an interview about policy and maybe didn't understand the fact that this was actually an interview that they were engaged with and that this has been reported, recorded, and put down. But unfortunately, because it's a very small yet local outfit, it hasn't been reported on. And once again, shows exactly they've got no idea whatsoever what they're doing. So, before we move on into this, please do remember to click the like, share, and subscribe button. And down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there is the Pony Club down below. So, we go over to this, to the Ashby News Nub News, talking about this local news website. As you can see here, Ashby Councillor Harrison, or Councillor Harrison, now answers questions on key service areas as Reform UK takes control of County Council. This was published just over the weekend. Now, bear in mind, all Reform councillors, as we've seen and we've seen reported, all been told to say the same thing. You're not allowed to do any interviews because you're too busy. You're learning your role. You'll do interviews later down the line. This councillor just did an interview on policy and he's got no clue. So this is a Leicestershire County Council one, as it said here, starts off. They've been elected, win a majority, but little, as they said, was known about reform intentions for Leicestershire ahead of the vote. However, with the group now previously telling local democracy reporting services that it did not even have an official manifesto locally. It did, of course, promise a deep dive into the council finances, try and root out any wasteful spending, but Leicestershire County Council has long prided itself on being one of the most efficiently run councils in the country. So they've got the leader of Leicestershire County Council, newly voted in, ahead of the first council meeting, asking them about what they're going to do with priorities for the area. So first question is on flooding in the area. So he asked him, the communities in Leicestershire have been hit hard by flooding in recent years, with many homes and businesses now left underwater for the second time in around 12 months this January. What will reform do to reduce the risk and support those impacted? And before we even get to the answer, remember, this is an aspect of climate change. Flooding, flood defenses, climate change. What are these reform lunatics, all about climate denial. No such thing as climate change. But this is all to do with climate change. To tackle flooding, you've got to have an understanding of that. You've got to understand why it's happening, what's going on there. Increased rainfall, planning for further ahead for stuff. So what answer did this councillor give? He said, answer. I've already arranged to meet with several senior officials. We've got a list of priorities that they will be our priorities now to discuss because we've got to do something. We can't just allow certain areas of Leicestershire to be badly flooded every year. But what we've got to do is something soon. We've got to have planning. We've got to, we're going to have to see if we can budget this. So there is going to be lots of movement because it'll be a big budget. What does that even mean? And then he follows up on that to that question by saying, so it's wait and see what officers say and go from there. He then replied, no, we know what we want to do. To which he then pushed back on, what do you want to do? To which he then responded, we've got to support those people who live in flooded areas. We've got to take positive action. To do what? What is the action he is going to take to help those people in those flooded areas? What is he going to do? What is he going to do? He continued saying, so we've got to establish an account. How much money is in that? £1 million? Is it 5 million? We've got to know what we're trying to achieve. Yeah, but to stop the flooding, that's what you're trying to achieve. If we got that budget, then we can do it. We know what we're doing. It's all part of a wide range of things that we're looking at. This very, very important. Good on this guy for holding this guy to account and following up on this. But I wish, you'll see in a moment, I wish he'd followed up like this on some other questions. But maybe he felt he was pushing a bit too hard and that maybe this councillor would do a runner if he pushed too hard. And hey, I understand. Bear in mind that so far, this actually is the first, as far as I'm aware, interview with a reform councillor, even though, as we've talked about just last week, they're all on media blackout. No interviews, no nothing. But good on this guy who got this interview. Anyway, then they move on to social care. So, the question put to this councillor was then, we've received lots of concerns over social care from those who rely on it. How will you make sure that the most vulnerable adults and children are supported? Well, if you look how they're supporting those people, they've put a 19 and 20-year-old in charge of adult and social care. That's how they do it. But bear in mind, this happened before the meeting where that happened. So that's, we'll let him off the hook for that. But anyway, so how then did he respond to this question? He said, we're going to be supporting them. Oh, we're going to... What a generic answer, non-answer that is. He said the Conservatives have cut lots of services. We're not. And why did they cut lots of those services to begin with? Would he know? Would Councillor Harrison know this? I think he should know that. We're not going to be cutting any services. We'll see what Farage and the London HQ say. We're going to be looking at the ability of the county council and the efficiency of the council to pay for them. This will be an external company of experts who make the case for us. Why are you getting... And I wish the guy who had been questioning saying, why are you getting an external company to come in and do this when you already have those people there? To which this guy has already said, yeah, Leicestershire County Council, one of the most efficient councils in the UK. But this guy and this councillor are saying, oh, need an external company of experts to come in and they'll make the case for that. Do they intend to now try and privatize social care? By saying, oh yeah, we're going to give all social care and the budget to like private companies and they can run it? Is that what they're intending to do? Because it sure sounds like it from that answer. So the other big thing that's going on is that there is a big reorganization going on, especially with Leicestershire and Leicester, potentially maybe even merging to one big region. Will this go ahead? It's not 100% sure. But these guys are in charge of that. How that rolls out, what happens on that. Bear in mind, a lot of other locals in that area talked about this in their manifesto, what they intended to do this. They had no local manifesto. They had no plan on how to do any of that. This is going to be a disaster. This is going to be an absolute disaster when they get around to this. So the question put forward to them. So three plans have been put forward now for the potential political restructure of Leicestershire. One would, of course, see a single council created for Leicestershire on existing city-county boundaries. The second would see two councils created for Leicestershire, again on existing council city boundaries. And the third would see Leicester's borders extended into Leicestershire. Which plan would you support? Bearing in mind, good question to ask. Good question to ask. He responded, at the moment, I am supporting Leicestershire, but I will be meeting with leaders of the 7 district councils soon. So I will be trying to do things and look at other people, how they see it and how they view it. But this is about money, which will be the most efficient. Maybe having one council then for that entire region. Maybe might be the best one if you're so concerned about money. So, and at the moment, I think it's the single council for Leicestershire. So, then he responded to, and of course, no extension of Leicester's borders. No, we won't be ceding territory to the city at a blink as the Tories did. We're going to be different. We're going to do things in a different way. I'm sure we'll see how that folds out. Because I think this reorganization on this, I think this could be a disaster. I don't know. I think that could go very, very bad on that. So, on to transport, public transport, very important for this. So, question put to the councillor: what do you think? What will you do to ensure that rural communities have access to public transport? Again, very important question for a lot of areas. His response was, we've got efficiency, and if we've got savings, we can then do something. So, only if you've got the efficiency and the savings, then can you do things for like rural public transport. Anyway, he continues, but we've got to review the buses because the problem was we had buses driving around with 2 or 3 people in it and there was no take up. So when it suddenly goes, everybody wants to join the petition and say, yes, we want it back. So it's one of those. If you're not using it, you could lose it. Oh, that will go down very well. I don't understand why no local reporters have picked up on this. This is kind of shocking on this. Like to say to this guy, oh yeah, we're all about efficiency and stuff, but yeah, they're not using it, so they're gonna lose it. But everyone just jumps on the petition, Maybe More people were using it than this guy thinks. Anyway, he continued to this. What was happening was the passenger numbers were going down, but the costs were still the same for the operator. So we, the council, had to put more money in it. Maybe then you need to take that transport back under local ownership. Because it seems to be the thing so far that the areas and places that have taken the public transport back under local ownership seems to be quite well, honestly, and doing quite a lot better than those who still have private operators. He's complaining about, oh, you want efficiency and stuff like that. Why not put it under public ownership then? Why not bring the local transport or public transport back under local ownership? Will he be doing that? Don't know. Don't think he will, but that is a strange quote to give. A strange quote to give, honestly. I am surprised. Well, first of all, I'm surprised the guy who did this got this. I think he did very good considering, as we've said, blackout, media blackout on reporting. All the reform councillors have been told you are not allowed to do interviews. This is an interview that clearly slipped through the cracks on this. But I wish he'd push back on this more. As sometimes you could tell that the person who's doing this interview did push back on this. And I think some of this stuff he should have pushed back on more, especially stuff on public transport, especially stuff on adult social care. I don't know if he knew about the guy they were going to be, appointing as head, Ken, the 19-year-old that we covered just last week of, child services, who has no experience whatsoever in any of that type of role. But yeah, would love to have seen the guy doing this question again. Not he's done some good questions, just needs some more pushback on this. But good questions nonetheless. Anyway, on finances. So he asked, of course, a question about finances, which was the interesting one. Reform UK has promised an audit of the county council's finances to try and identify waste and efficiencies. How are you going to fund the audit given the council's difficult financial position? Very good question indeed. Very good question indeed. And the answer was to that, we'll find that sort of money because it's vital. It's vital. We'll be able to do that. Don't worry. What? What? So you're just going to find this money. How are you going to find that money? And that still doesn't address the very difficult financial position the council is in. Again, this is where I said, my only criticism of the guy who did this interview, sometimes you needed to push back on some of this. And that was certainly an answer. I would have loved to have seen you push back on that. But that, I believe, was the last one. But yes, like I say, this is the councillor, Dan Harrison. Oh boy, he's got no clue. He's got no clue. Those answers don't even tell you anything. If anything, they tell you he's got no idea on some of this stuff. This is going to be a walking disaster. That is going to be a walking disaster on that one. Good Lord. But anyway, let me know what you think down to this. It is Councillor Harrison, your councillor. What do you think to this? So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.